My name is Eleanor Wright. I am 73 years old, and for most of my life, I believed love meant giving without asking. That belief almost cost me everything. I found out. I wasn't really invited the night I finished packing. The suitcase stood open on my bed, neat and careful, just like the life I had always lived. I had folded my dresses by color, placed my walking shoes in a separate bag, and tucked a small framed photograph between my sweaters so it wouldn't break. It was a picture of my late husband, Henry, smiling in the sun, taken years ago at the very same beach we were supposed to visit again. I was 74 years old, and for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. My phone vibrated. It was a message from my son. "Mom, quick thing about the beach trip. Can we talk tomorrow?" I smiled at the screen, thinking he wanted to coordinate rides or ask what snacks I preferred. I typed back, "Of course, sweetheart. Everything okay?" The reply came almost immediately. "Well, there's been a little change. Lavra thinks it might be better if you don't come this time. The house might feel crowded. But don't worry, you've already helped so much." Helped. That word sat on my chest like a weight. I reread the message slowly, as if reading it again might change its meaning. It didn't. My hands began to tremble, and I set the phone down beside the suitcase, afraid I might drop it. For 3 years, I had planned this trip. I had saved carefully from my retirement checks. I had chosen the house, close to the water but not too noisy. I had paid the deposit, the cleaning fee, the activity passes for the children. Every decision had been made with one thought in mind: family. And now, suddenly, I was the extra piece. The room felt too quiet. Even the ticking clock on my knitstand sounded loud, almost accusing. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the suitcase, at the dresses I would no longer wear, at the shoes that would never touch the sand, at Henry's photograph, still smiling, unaware of how small my world had become. This wasn't the first time I had felt pushed aside. It had started slowly, years ago. Holidays celebrated elsewhere. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Family group photos where I was always the one holding the camera. Invitations that are not actual. I had told myself it was normal. That families grow. Chill, I've movies on. That a good mother doesn't complain. So I stayed quiet, kept giving money when they needed help, babysitting when they needed rest, listening when no one else had time. But that night, sitting beside a suitcase packed for a trip I was no longer welcome on, something inside me shifted. I wasn't hurt because I couldn't go to the beach. I was hurt because I finally understood my role. I wasn't family anymore. I was funding. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. The house felt bigger than usual, every step echoing. I poured myself a cup of tea I didn't want and sat at the table where Henry and I once planned our future. I thought of all the years I had put others first, of all the moments I had swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided my entire life. What happens if I stop paying to belong? My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mom, don't be upset. This isn't a big deal." I stared at the screen. Then I did something I had never done before. I didn't reply. And in that silence, a decision began to form. One that would change everything they thought they knew about me. They believed the money would keep coming. What they didn't know was that by morning, I would take something back they never expected me to touch. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image, my suitcase, open and waiting, like it didn't understand why it had been abandoned. At dawn, I finally gave up and sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in Henry's old sweater, listening to the house breathe. At 7:30, I made coffee instead of tea, strong, bitter. It felt appropriate. For years, I had avoided one thing at all costs: conflict. I believed peace was something you earn by staying quiet, by bending a little more each time until there was nothing left to bend. That belief had shaped my entire life. But that morning, something felt different. I opened my laptop and logged into my online bank account. The screen glowed softly in the dim kitchen light. There it was, the family travel fund. A separate account I had created just to stay organized, though deep down, I knew it existed so I could keep giving without thinking too hard. I clicked into the account details. The balance stared back at me. $18,96,442. Almost every dollar had been set aside for the beach trip. The house rental, groceries, tickets, emergency expenses, just in case. Just in case they needed something. I hovered the cursor over the transaction history. Payments lined up, neatly, confirmation numbers, dates, amounts. I recognized each one like milestones of my own fading importance. House deposit, activity passes, fee, early grocery order. Paid. Not once had anyone asked how it affected me. My phone buzzed again. A message from my daughter-in-law, Lavra. Good morning. Just checking, did the payment for the second half of the house go through? Routing. No explanation. Apology. Just expectation. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking again, but this time I didn't set the phone down. I let myself feel it, the disappointment, the anger, the grief. Then I did something I had never done before. I opened the settings tab. Pause, future transactions. The words felt heavy, like they carried consequences I had been avoiding my whole life. A warning message appeared, asking me to confirm. It explained that scheduled payments would stop. Pending payments might fail. I stared at the screen for a long time. In my mind, I heard Henry's voice, gentle, steady. Eleanor, love shouldn't cost you your dignity. I clicked confirm. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms, no flashing lights. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Changes saved successfully. That was it. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, waiting to feel panic or regret. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in years. The money in that account felt like it belonged to me again. The rest of the morning passed, slowly. I watered the plants, folded laundry that didn't need folding, rearranged a drawer that had been fine just the way it was. I was avoiding my phone, but I didn't turn it off. Part of me knew what was coming. By noon, the messages started. Mom, are you having trouble with the bank? The payment didn't go through. Can you check this ASAP? I read each one, my heart pounding harder with every notification. I noticed how the tone shifted, first confused, then impatient, then irritated. Still no one asked how I was. Still no one said, "We're sorry." I didn't respond. 2 in the afternoon called. I watched his name light up on the screen until it stopped ringing. A voicemail followed. "Mom, please call me. This is important." Important. The word made me laugh. A short, dry sound that surprised me. Everything had been important when they needed something. Nothing had been important when I needed respect. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. The suitcase was still there, open, untouched. I closed it carefully, not because I planned to go, but because I was done waiting. As I slid it under the bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was different. "Mom, did we do something wrong?" I stared at the screen. Because now, for the first time, they were starting to notice. They thought the money was the problem. What they didn't realize was that I was about to take back something far more valuable than that. I let the phone ring the next time, not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I needed to hear something different. I needed to hear concern that wasn't tied to inconvenience, an apology that wasn't wrapped in urgency. It never came. By evening, the messages had slowed, replaced by silence again. That silence felt familiar, like an old coat I had worn for too many years. I made myself dinner, simple and quiet. Soup and toast. The kind of meal you eat when you're not hungry but know you should eat. Something anyway. As I sat at the table, I thought about all the dinners I had made for others over the years. Meals filled with laughter and noise. Plates emptied without a second thought. No one ever noticed when I stopped cooking. After dinner, I picked up a photo album from the living room shelf. It was heavy, its spine worn soft from use. I hadn't opened it in a long time. Inside were birthdays, graduations, holidays, smiling faces, arms around shoulders. Proof that once I had belonged in every picture. Halfway through the album, there was a photo that stopped me. It was from 10 years ago. A beach trip, not this one, but another. I was standing slightly off to the side, holding a cooler, smiling at the camera. Everyone else was centered, close together. I remembered that day clearly. I had paid for the rental, for the food, for the gas. And I remembered how tired I was that evening, how no one noticed when I slipped away early to lie down. Even then, the pattern was there. I closed the album and rested my hands on it, feeling a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with age. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad. Sad that I had taught them how to treat me by never demanding better. At 8:30, my doorbell rang. The sound startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief moment, I considered not answering. Old habits are hard to break. But then I stood up, straightened my sweater, and walked to the door. Was my son. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His jacket was still on, like he wasn't planning to stay long. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. We sat across from each other in the living room. The space between us felt wider than it ever had before. He glanced around, as if seeing the house for the first time, then cleared his throat. "The payments didn't go through," he said. "Laura's stressed. The kids are asking questions." I waited. He frowned slightly. "Mom." "Yes, I replied. He hesitated, then said, "We need to figure this out." That was it. No mention of the message he sent me. No explanation. No acknowledgement of how it must have felt to be told not to come. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them steady. "Did you notice something else?" I asked quietly. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "That I haven't been calling. That I haven't been packing. That I stopped talking about the trip altogether." He shifted again. "We figured you were upset." I nodded. "And did you wonder why?" Silence. I leaned forward slightly. Not once did anyone ask how I felt. Not once did anyone say they were sorry. "You noticed the money right away, though." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said calmly. "What's not fair is being included only when it's convenient." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time since he arrived, he looked unsure. "I didn't think it was that serious," he said finally. "That," I replied, "is exactly the problem." He stared at the floor, rubbing his hands together. The house felt heavy with things that had gone unsaid for years. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Mom, we'll talk again," he said. Nodded. But as I watched him walk away, I knew something important. Talking wouldn't be enough anymore. They thought the conversation was over. What they didn't know was that I was about to make a choice that would redefine our entire relationship. After my son left, the house felt unusually quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with a long day, but the kind that presses in on you, asking questions you've avoided for years. I stood by the door for a moment, listening to his car fade down the street, and realized something painful. He hadn't come to see me. He had come to fix a problem. And once again, I wasn't the priority. I walked back into the living room and sat in Henry's old chair. The cushions still held the shape of him, or maybe I just imagined it did. I rested my hands on the armrests and stared at the wall where we used to hang our family calendar. Birthdays, anniversaries, school events, my handwriting filling every square. When had my name stopped appearing on anyone else's calendar? The next morning, I woke up early and did something small but meaningful. I made my bed carefully, smoothing the sheets the way Henry liked. Then I opened the curtains wide and let the sunlight flood the room. It felt like a decision, even if I couldn't yet explain why. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote a single sentence at the top of the page. What do I want now? The question startled me. For decades, I had known exactly what everyone else wanted. I had adjusted my life around it quietly, willingly. But I couldn't remember the last time I had asked myself that question honestly. I stared at the page, pen hovering. I want to feel included. I want to feel respected. I want to stop apologizing for needing care. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Page after page filled with thoughts I had kept buried under responsibility and routine. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. A group message. Laura had added me to a family chat I hadn't been part of before. "We should all talk about this," she wrote. "There's been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. I read the word several times. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. I typed a response, then erased it. typed again, then erased that too. Finally, I wrote something short and simple. I need some time. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I sent it before I could change my mind. Almost immediately, dots appeared someone typing. Then another message popped up. This is really inconvenient, Eleanor. I felt a familiar tug in my chest. The old urge to explain, to soften my words, to make it easier for everyone else. But instead, I set the phone face down on the table. I went for a walk. The neighborhood looked the same as it always had. But I felt different moving through it. Lighter, somehow. As if I had set something down without realizing how heavy it was. At the park, I sat on a bench and watched families pass by. Grandparents holding hands with grandchildren. Mothers pushing strollers. Laughter floating on the air. I wondered how many women like me sat quietly in their homes, believing they were asking for too much, just by wanting to be included. When I returned home, there was a voicemail waiting. Son again. Mom, I think we messed up, he said, his voice quieter this time. I didn't realize how much this hurt you. I listened twice. He hadn't said sorry, but it was the closest he had come. That evening, I made dinner for myself and ate it slowly, without rushing. I didn't turn on the television. I let my thoughts settle. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to fix things. I was thinking about what it would look like if I didn't. Before going to bed, I opened my laptop and looked again at the travel account. The paused transactions sat there, unchanged. I didn't unpause them. I closed the computer and turned off the light. Because tomorrow, I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. They were waiting for me to give in. What they didn't know was that my silence was only the beginning. I woke up the next morning with an unfamiliar feeling. Not anger, sadness, determination. For the first time in a long while, my day wasn't shaped around waiting for someone else to call, apologize, or need something from me. The house felt calmer, as if it sensed the change before I fully did. After breakfast, I opened my closet and pulled out a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was simple, soft blue. The kind of thing I used to save for special occasions. As I slipped it on, I realized how many moments of my life I had postponed waiting for the right invitation, the right approval, the right time. I decided today would be different. I drove to the community center on the edge of town, the one I passed almost every week, but never entered. The Saint Senhor Traveu and João's welcome. I sat in my car for a few minutes, hands on the steering wheel, feeling oddly nervous. Then I laughed at myself. 74 years old, and still afraid of walking into a room alone. Inside, the space was warm and bright. A group of women sat around a long table, chatting over coffee. They looked up as I entered, smiles easy and unguarded. First time, one of them asked. Yes, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Pull up a chair, she said. We're just talking about our next trip. That word again. Trip. So, for the next hour, I listened. Women shared stories about places they had visited, places they dreamed of going. Not luxury resorts, real places. Meaningful ones. They spoke about independence, about choosing joy without waiting for permission. No one asked what I could pay for. They asked my name. On the drive home, something inside me unlocked. I wasn't finished living. That afternoon, I made a decision that would have terrified me a week earlier. I rebooked the beach house. Not the same one. A smaller place, cozy, close to the water. Just enough space for me and maybe a few new friends. I canceled the old reservation entirely. The refund confirmation sat in my inbox like proof of something solid and real. When my phone rang later, I didn't jump this time. "Tu was Laura." "We just found out the house is cancelled," she said sharply. "What's going on?" I took a breath. "I made other plans," I said. There was a pause. "Other plans?" She repeated, "Yes. You didn't tell us." I smiled faintly. I wasn't asked. Her silence spoke louder than words. That evening, my son called again. His tone was different now, careful, unsure. "Mom," he said, "are you still coming on the trip?" I looked around my kitchen, at the sunlight on the counter, at the quiet that no longer felt lonely. "No," I replied gently. "I'm going somewhere else." "With who?" "With people who want me there." He didn't respond right away. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said finally. "I've always felt this way," I replied. I just stopped hiding it. After the call ended, I stood at the window and watched the sky change colors. I thought about Henry, about how he always encouraged me to try new things, even when I doubted myself. I wished he were here to see this version of me, but maybe he already did. I went to bed that night with a strange sense of excitement. Because the trip I was about to take wasn't just about the beach. It was about reclaiming a life I had almost forgotten I was allowed to live. They believed I would come back once the guilt set in. What they didn't realize was that I was finally learning how to choose myself. The morning of my departure arrived quietly. No chaos, no rushing children, no last-minute demands. Just the soft sound of my alarm and the early light, stretching across the bedroom floor. I moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring each moment. My suitcase stood closed this time, not abandoned, not waiting, ready. As I zipped it shut, I felt something close to pride. Not because I was going somewhere special, but because I was choosing to go at all. Before leaving, I stood for a moment in the hallway and looked around the house. Every corner held memories. Some warm, some heavy, but none of them owned me anymore. I locked the door and placed the key in my purse. On the drive to the coast, my phone buzzed several times. I didn't check it immediately. The road ahead felt more important than the noise behind me. When I finally stopped for coffee and glanced at the screen, there were missed calls. "Son, Laura." Then my son again. A text followed. "Mom, please call us. We need to talk." Need. I sipped my coffee and watched the ocean come into view in the distance. Pale blue and endless. For once, I didn't feel rushed by urgency that wasn't mine. I arrived at the house just after noon. It was smaller than the one I had originally booked, but perfect. White shutters, a porch that faced the water, windows open to the sound of waves. The air smelled like salt and possibility. Inside, the place felt welcoming, lived in, as if it expected me. That evening, the women from the community group arrived one by one. No grand introductions. Pretending. Just easy conversation and shared laughter. We cooked together, ate together, sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in years, I wasn't the background figure. I was part of the moment. Later that night, after the others had gone to their rooms, I checked my phone again. A voicemail from my son. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady. "We didn't realize how much we were hurting you. The kids asked why you weren't with us, and we didn't have an answer." I sat on the edge of the bed and listened twice. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the shoreline, letting the cold water lap at my ankles. Each step felt grounding, real. I thought about how often I had stood still while life rushed past me, afraid to inconvenience anyone. Now, the tide moved around me, and I didn't step aside. Later that day, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Mom," my son said softly, "can we come see you when you get back?" I paused. "Why?" I asked, not sharply, just clearly. Hesitated. "Because we miss you." The words settled in my chest, heavy but welcome. "We'll talk," I said. That night, sitting on the porch under a sky full of stars, one of the women turned to me. "You seem different," she said. "Lighter." I smiled. I stopped trying to earn my place. She nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. As the waves rolled in, steady and sure, I realized something important. They were starting to see me now. Not as a wallet, not as a convenience, but as a woman who could walk away. And sometimes, that's the only way people learn your value. They were ready to welcome me back. But before that could happen, I had one final decision to make. I returned home a week later. The house looked the same, but I didn't. Something in me had settled. Like a storm that had finally moved on, leaving the air clearer. I unpacked slowly, placing each item away with care. Not because I was tired, but because I was no longer in a hurry to fill the silence. That afternoon, my son came by alone. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of himself. I noticed it immediately. He wasn't the confident man who usually walked in assuming things would go his way. He looked like a boy again uncertain, searching. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I had spent years planning holidays, budgeting trips, and writing lists that never included myself. Sunlight streamed through the window, landing between us like a quiet witness. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "I waited for the trip, for the message, for making you feel like you were optional." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. "I didn't see it before." "I really didn't, We just got used to you always being there, always helping." "That's exactly what hurt," I said gently. "Being taken for granted doesn't feel like love." He looked up then, meeting my eyes. "I know, and I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "We want things to go back to normal." There it was, the familiar expectation. I folded my hands together. "What does normal mean to you?" Hesitated. "Family dinners, trips, you being involved." I nodded slowly. I want those things too, but not the way they were. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean I won't fund my way into belonging. I won't stay quiet when something hurts. And I won't accept being included only when it's convenient. The words felt strong but calm-like. They had been waiting to be spoken for years. He swallowed. That's fair. I also won't compete with anyone for space in your life. I continued. If I'm invited, it's because I'm wanted, not because I'm useful. He nodded again, this time more firmly. I understand, he said. And for the first time, I believed him. Before he left, he paused at the door. Mom, I'm proud of you. The words surprised me. They shouldn't have, but they did. After he left, I sat alone for a while, letting the conversation settle. I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. Patterns don't vanish because of one honest talk. But something had changed. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my granddaughter. Grandma, can we bake together this weekend? Just us? I smiled. Yes, I typed back. I'd love that. As I set the phone down, I realized something important. I hadn't won anything. I hadn't proven a point. I had simply stopped disappearing. And sometimes, that's all it takes to be seen again. I thought this was where the story would end. But one final moment would teach me the most important lesson of all. The baking day arrived quietly, without expectations. I woke early, not because I was nervous, but because I was content. The kind of contentment that comes when you know you're no longer waiting for permission to exist in your own life. I tied my apron, preheated the oven, and set out the ingredients the way I always had, carefully. Lovingly, but this time, it felt different. When my granddaughter arrived, she hugged me tightly, not the quick, distracted kind of hug. A real one. I missed you. Grandma, she said. The words warmed me in a way no apology ever could. We baked slowly, flour dusting the counter, laughter filling the kitchen. She asked me questions, not polite ones, but curious ones, about my childhood, about Henry, about the places I had been and the things I had loved before I became just grandma. I answered honestly, later. As the cookies cooled, she sat at the table swinging her legs and said, I didn't know you felt lonely. I paused, then smiled softly. I didn't know how to say it. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. That afternoon, my son stopped by again, this time with no agenda. No urgency. He stayed for coffee. We talked about ordinary things. The weather, work, a book I was reading. Normal things, but the difference was in how he listened. In the weeks that followed, life didn't turn perfect. There were still missed calls. Still moments of old habits trying to return, but now, there were also boundaries, quiet. Firm ones that I protected without guilt. I continued meeting with the women from the travel group. We planned another trip. This time to a small mountain town. I joined a book club. I started walking every morning, rain or shine. I filled my life with things that didn't require explanation. One evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. The same way I had during my beach trip. The sky glowed orange and pink, and I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. I thought about all the years I had mistaken endurance for love, about How often women are taught that self-sacrifice is the highest form of devotion, and how wrong that can be. Love should not require you to disappear. Family should not cost you your dignity. And age should never mean invisibility. I didn't stop loving my family. I simply stopped shrinking for them now when they invite me. I go because I want to, not because I'm needed. When they forget, I don't chase. I trust that those who value me will find their way back, and if they don't, I still have a full life. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story waiting, giving, hoping you're not alone, and you're not asking for too much, you're asking for respect, and that is something you never have to earn. Sometimes, the most powerful thing an older woman can do is step fully into her own space and refuse to leave it again. You don't lose your worth as you age. You lose people who forget how to value it. Like, share, and subscribe for more true stories.